In today's video, we're going to continue on with our series covering all 31 NHL teams, recapping their 17-18 season, and looking ahead to the 2018 offseason to discuss what should we expect from these teams to move forward towards next season. Today's team we're discussing is the Boston Bruins, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're discussing the Boston Bruins. We're going to take a look at their 17-18 season, discuss some of their stats, what went well, what could have been improved on, and we'll have a look at their 2018 offseason to discuss what should we expect from this team to move forward into next season. So let's jump in here. As we know, the Boston Bruins had a very solid season, gave the Tampa Bay Lightning a good run for their money for the top spot in the Atlantic Division. They finished very strong. Obviously in the playoffs, they made it to the second round. So overall, it was a very solid year for the Boston Bruins. I think they caught a lot of people by surprise. Coming into the season, a lot of people had them pegged as maybe possibly being a wildcard team. Some people had them out of the playoffs. A lot of people didn't have them pegged to do as well as they did. So for a lot of Bruins fans, it's a very pleasant surprise to see them come along so far so quickly. And a lot of their young players really played a major role in revitalizing this team, and their veterans came through with some strong performances as well. Now, as we know, the Bruins finished with a record of 50 wins, 20 losses, 12 overtime losses for 112 points, second in the Atlantic Division. So again, a very, very solid year. They scored 267 goals, put them 6th in the NHL. They allowed 211 goals, which put them 4th best in the NHL, so another solid result there. On special teams, their power play was very, very good at 23.5%, 4th best in the NHL, and their PK was really solid as well at 83.7%. 3rd best in the NHL. So overall, their special teams were fantastic. They ranked very high in goals for, goals against. Face-offs, they weren't too bad as well. Face-off wins, they had 50.7%, which was 11th best in the league as well. Obviously, when you have Patrice Bergeron as your top center, you know your face-off percentage is going to be pretty decent, as he's one of the best in the league. So overall, like statistically speaking, this team had a very solid year. Now let's have a look at some of the individual performances and discuss some of the players who had really good years as well. Obviously, Brad Marchand had a really solid year, 85 points as well. Obviously, again, we've seen him take a few suspensions, but when he was in the lineup, he was very solid and continues to put up fantastic offensive numbers for the Bruins. David Pastrnak, again, another solid year from him, putting up 80 points, including 35 goals. He's become a huge part of this team. Patrice Bergeron, the steady forward who continues to impress and put up all these great numbers while providing awesome leadership, is continuing with another 30-goal season in 63 points. I thought Tuukka Rask and net had a solid season, as well as backup Anton Khudobin. Both goalies really played well. Rask put up numbers of 34, 14, and 5 with a 2.36 goals against and a 917 save percentage. So he had another really solid season. Would have been nice to see him have a little bit better performance in the playoffs, but overall, Rask was really solid this season. I thought rookie Jake DeBrusk was very impressive in his first full campaign, putting up 16 goals and 43 points. I thought DeBrusk was really important in giving that top six a little bit of a boost to get some more secondary scoring going. I was really impressed with his game this past season. Now, offensively speaking, I thought Torrey Krug had an excellent year, 59 points. So he's provided a lot of offense from the back end as well. And even Riley Nash, considering the role he normally plays, Riley Nash really provided some really solid play, for the most part playing a bottom six role. He was fantastic, putting up 41 points. I thought he did really well this past year. So now let's take a look at some of the areas that maybe could have possibly been improved on or weren't quite as good as they would have liked. To be honest, there's not a lot to talk about, really, because the team had an awesome season. I think David Backes kind of falls into this category. Now, a lot of that revolves around his health and staying healthy and being able to play more games. He was able to play 57 games, put up 33 points, so it wasn't too bad, but obviously the contract that he was given when he came to Boston, part of that, you know, the concern from some folks was that with the way he plays, he's played a very physical, type of game over the years, and his body's taken a lot of wear and tear, and he has missed a fair bit of time. So obviously it would be nice to see Backes put together a more solid year, and I know he ended the year, which looked like could have been a concussion. I haven't seen any reports or updates as to what his health is like so far in the offseason, so I don't know if there's anything lingering there or if he's good to go heading into next season or not. Another one I thought, which was really just the end of the the year was the Rick Nash experiment. I don't think went overly well in Boston. He did have a few good games shortly after arriving from the trade from the Rangers, but overall I thought his play was underwhelming. Didn't put up a lot of really solid numbers and didn't have a great playoff. So I'm not really sure the Rick Nash experiment worked well. But speaking of Rick Nash, let's jump into some transactions and deals that we saw go down with this club throughout the year and how the roster changed. Obviously, the trade deadline was quite good for the Bruins. They really made a big effort to bring in some guys to really improve their roster and to really try to have a solid chance at going for the Stanley Cup this year. Obviously, they grabbed Rick Nash from the Boston Bruins, which was a fairly big deal. They brought in Brian Gionta as a free agent. They picked up Tommy Wingels. They also picked up Nick Holden from the Rangers as well. Going out was players like Frank Verchano and Ryan Spooner. So overall, they looked pretty solid on paper. They brought in some decent veteran players with some good experience. I'm not so sure that if looking back, if you could have a crystal ball to see how things worked out with Rick Nash, as a Bruins fan, I'd really like to hear from you. If you could do it over again, would you still make this trade? I'm not so sure that I would if I were a Bruins fan or Bruins GM, but I'd like to hear from the Bruins faithful out there to see what you guys think of this trade now that they've had a chance to kind of play things out. And if you could do it over again, would you still make the deal for Rick Nash? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Now let's jumping into the 2018 offseason. Let's take a look at some contracts that they need to deal with. Obviously, they have a fair bit of players that fall under the UFA and RFA categories that they either need to decide on re-signing or not. So let's take a look at that first. Under the UFA category, there's quite a few actually. Most of the players they picked up at the deadline fall into this category as well as others. I mean, they got Tommy Wingels as a UFA. They've got Rick Nash and Riley Nash. Obviously, Riley Nash was there the whole season, but both of those guys are pending UFAs here. Tim Schaller, who had a pretty decent season being a bottom six guy as well as a UFA. Nick Holden, who they picked up from the Rangers on defense, as a UFA. And backup goaltender Anton Hudobin, who had a pretty solid year, is also a UFA. Now, right now they have $7.4 million in cap space based on the cap today, but it is expected the salary cap will increase, and it is supposed to go up anywhere from 5 to 7 million is the estimate. So if we go in the low end of that, let's say they get an additional 5 million in cap space due to the increase, that would put them around 12.4 million thereabouts in cap space potentially. So they got all those UFAs, and then for RFAs, the main one they have is Sean Corelli. So they don't have a lot of in the RFA category, just really the one player of prominent note here. So obviously they got some decisions to make on some of these players. Now, I would probably think that it's likely that Rick Nash doesn't come back. Decent chance Tommy Wingels doesn't come back. Or Brian Gionta, I believe has already been told he won't be offered a contract, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me on that, but if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was already mentioned. Now, Riley Nash is a player that I think they probably would be interested in keeping for the right price, but because of his solid season, I think he may demand more money on the open market, so it's kind of tough to say what happens with Riley Nash. I think they'll be interested. They're certainly going to talk to him, but it really boils down to if they can fit his new contract into the long-term plans here with the Bruins. So that's a player to keep your eye on. I'm not sure what's going to happen with him, but certainly possible he returns if they can work out the right price for sure. Nick Holden's debatable as well. I mean, I know there's been a lot of trade chatter about the left side of the defense for the Bruins, and the name that keeps being mentioned as possible trade chip is Torrey Krug. Now, that's a player that kind of surprised me a little bit, but I understand how the Bruins are not as enamored with his defensive play. Offensively speaking, he provides a lot back there. He's obviously their top offensive D. I mean, obviously they have younger players like Charlie McAvoy, like a Brandon Carlo. Chair is still chugging along at his age. Not the player he used to be, but he's still in pretty good shape and still can contribute for sure. So he's going to be around for at least one more year as well. Then they have guys like Austin Sarnik, and then they've had Nick Holden and other guys to kind of keep in mind here. So is it possible that we see Torrey Krug get traded? And maybe they try to find a little bit more of a defensively minded D on the left side that can provide some offense as well. And I heard also mentioned in those trade rumors was that they'd like a player who can provide a little bit more grit as well. So maybe they want some more size, some more grit, but still with a bit of an offensive output here. So it's a tough thing to find for sure. I don't think it's a for sure thing they trade Torrey Krug, but he's probably been the one Bruins player that's been mentioned the most in off-season trade chatter and trade rumors so far. So give me a comment on that as well. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Should the Bruins consider trading Corey Krug in order to upgrade the left side team, maybe get another defenseman that's a little bit bigger, a little bit grittier, but obviously they can't lose too much offense here because he does provide a lot from the back end. So I'd like to hear your thoughts there, but it is something that's been rumored around the Bruins club. So we'll see what happens here, but certainly a possibility they look to make a move in that direction. Now getting into some prospects here, I thought Ryan Donato had a really solid year coming into the, after he signed his contract once his college career came to a close and he decided to make the jump to the pro game. I thought he had a really solid end of year for the Bruins, looked really good, didn't look out of place, scored some big goals as well. Personally, and there's been some chatter around maybe that they might be interested in Ilya Kovalchuk or another top 6 winger. Personally, I would almost give Ryan Donato a chance. Like, he fit in really well. You know, he can go up between second and third line. You got DeBrusk over there as well. I mean, they seem to play pretty decent on that. You know, with Krejci when, or even with Bergeron, depending on when they juggle the lines a bit at times. So, I mean, really, I think they have a young kid who's, you know, going to be able to produce a lot of goals for them here in Donato. And I think that they should give him a really solid opportunity to play with more offensive type players. So if it were me, instead of going after another either Rick Nash or a comparable to him, I would let Donato have the position to at least start the year, see how things go. But there has been some chatter that they may bring in some more experienced winger, perhaps like an Ilya Kovalchuk or another comparable type of winger in order to kind of take that role on. So let me know what you think about that as well. It's something that they're apparently looking at. So we'll see what happens there. Kovalchuk's talking to a lot of teams, so there's no promise or guarantee that he would land in Boston for sure. Besides Ryan Donato, obviously the other top prospect who could make an impact this year and at least get some games in would be forward Trent Frederick. He's had a pretty solid career so far leading up to his pro debut. I mean, he's played pretty well in college as well as the American Hockey League level, so I'm sure he'll get an opportunity this year to at least get into some games. I'm not sure he'll be a regular this year, but I'm sure he'll at least be given some opportunity. So keep your eyes for him. He's a pretty solid forward prospect as well. Leading into the 2018 NHL Draft, which is coming up here to end of this week, Friday, Saturday. They don't have their first round pick or their third round pick, but they do have a third round pick. It's the Florida Panthers pick that they picked up in the Vetrano deal. So they do have a pick from the Panthers in the third round. They have their own second round. So they're only missing a pick in the first round. So, could we possibly see the Bruins make a deal to get a first round pick back? I mean, if they were to dangle a Torrey Krug out there in the trade bait world, it is possible that that might be what they're looking for in return. But at the same time, I've heard that if they do trade Krug, that it'd be more likely to bring in another D. But it's hard to say what happens here. At the same time, though, I wouldn't be completely shocked to see if they could figure out a way to get a first-round pick. But at the same time, they do have a lot of younger players that have been injected into their lineup, as well as some decent prospects already kind of on the way. So they very well may stand pat on that and opt to not try to obtain a first-round pick. But as of right now, they are a little bit low on the pick side of things for coming up for the draft this Friday and Saturday. The NHL Draft is expected to be a very active time for a lot of movement between picks and players, though, so we will be interested to see if Don Sweeney and the Bruins get involved in any way, but it is certainly something that they will probably have a look at. And then, of course, free agency follows not far behind on July the 1, so obviously we have a lot of things that could go down with this club. They could be in the market for a top 6 winger. They could be in the market to maybe move a Krug and get a different type of defender back there. So we could see some change from the Bruins. Otherwise, they have a lot of pieces that are kind of set in stone, and they should just continue to run with because they had an awesome season. I fully suspect that with a few minor tweakings here, the Bruins can be contending for a top spot in the Atlantic Division next season and have an excellent shot at being one of the top contenders to even win the Eastern Conference and go back to the Stanley Cup Finals for another crack at the Stanley Cup. It would not surprise me in the least. Now, if you're new to the channel, hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button as well. I'd really appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.